Good morning. I would like to call the meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Courtesy to all, will you ensure that you've silenced your cell phones? Also, I would like to remind your directors to turn on your microphone each time that you speak in order to help with the audio and video recordings. For the record, I will note that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law, and that the notice of this board meeting was provided to each of the directors. Directors Henderson and stated that they would not be present for the meeting. Before we proceed to the agenda, I'd like to welcome our two new board members, Kat Parks from Hamilton. Welcome. From Sugar Land. Welcome. Congratulations on your appointment to the board. We're happy to have you and look forward to working with you. We've reached the portion of the meeting where we have set aside time to hear from you, the general public. Those filling out one of the cards available at the receptionist desk will be called to approach the podium and make your comments at this time. And we have John Asbury from Bell County Aquifer Recharge. John, where are you? You can come up to the podium and you'll have. Will you time?
Sure.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm John Asbury. I'm Temple, Texas. I have no conflict of interest. I'm not paid to be here, and Texas. I'm here today, and there's a if you want to. It's additional items I'd like you to consider at this point. Presently in Texas, there are 3 aquifer recharge programs in place. El Paso has one, and there San Antonio has one. Clearwater Water District in Temple recently got permitted to drill a well into the Trinity Aquifer. And this is to be used mainly for cooling. There is now in process a program to make this well both an injection and extraction well. This means they can take water out of it, but they can put water into it, back into the aquifer at this point. And you're actually involved in this already because the water that is being used in the cooling tower and an adjacent electrical generation plant comes from a BRA effluent wastewater. In place for this to be used, the same water source to be used for the injection into the Trinity Aquifer. That probably is not enough water compared to what could be put in. And at this point, once this water is in the aquifer, it can be recaptured or it can be left there. It never evaporates; it stays there. This particular aquifer, the average age of water is 2,000 years old. It's been there a long time. It's what they call it in Bell County. So periodically, with rare, lakes are full, the river runs full, and it does that for a short period of time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks at this point. You have more water in the Brazos River than you can use at this point. From below Lake Belton Dam, where the water comes out of the Leon River to the Gulf Coast, there is no impediment to that water. The Gulf Coast never stops at this point. And the Brazos River Authority water treatment plant, Belton, is 100 yards from the Leon River. So it could be possible during the time when you have excess water flow that the Brazos River can't use for normal obligations from ecology to your customers. That water could also be used for the injection into this well. It might be rare, it might be free. it seems a little bit embarrassing now to talk about it since, the water levels are so low. Belton is 16 feet down now. See.
Mr. Asbury,
Okay.
time is up.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your handout.
Thank you.
Seeing that there's no one else to speak, no more cards have been presented, we'll move forward with the agenda. Item number 1, report and possible discussion on General Manager CEO report by David Collingsworth. General Manager CEO, David.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're having a little bit of an audio issue. So I'd like to ask you to turn your microphones off if you're not talking. We've got some technical difficulties as far as typically we can hit a button and turn everybody's on and off, but we're not able to do that today. So there's that. First of all, Dr. Asbury, did he leave already? He's just so point on with aquifer storage and recovery, and we hope to be a stakeholder in the project that he referenced in Bell County as far as looking at when the Corps of Engineer lakes are in the flood stage, how do you take some of that water and store it for local beneficial use? We're also looking at doing some of that in Williamson County and potentially other places of the basin. So this was the second time that he's come to the board and talked, and we really appreciate his interest in what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Today we have a very short agenda. Don't let it fool you. It's very significant business. We have a lot to do. We have practiced and timed it, and I've been wrong with my time projections before. I've been really wrong with my time projections before, but we think that we get through our agenda in time for our building dedication ceremony for the Ford family at 11 o'clock. If we're not done, then we'll take a break at 11 and do our ceremony and lunch, and then come back after lunch and deal with the business at hand that we need to do. But I think the way that we have things timed, we'll be able to accomplish that. The Phil Ford dedication, again, is at 11. It's not an unveiling like most building dedications would be, just because we didn't want to parade a bunch of folks out at 12 o'clock when it's 105 degrees. So we have a photographer here that will take photos of the family or anybody that wants a photo in front of the sign, and I think we'll have a really good ceremony planned. And I know Phil's family is going to be here, and they're very appreciative of what we're doing and look forward to this morning. So we're in August, July, fixed to be in August. It's hot, it's dry. As Dr. Asbury referred to, Lake Belton's 16 feet low. We also have lakes that are almost full. So we have a really wide array of drought and non-drought issues, depending on what reservoir you're looking at and situations in the Brazos. We're releasing water for downstream customers. We've got more releases planned. And the moral of this story is if you're out there watching and you have concerns about the drought, we're back to our drought videos, www.brazos.org. Decisions are being made on a weekly basis, how we're managing water and how much we're managing. So if you set in on that meeting this week and you feel like you don't need to in the next 2 weeks, you may be missing information. So again, Aaron and his group are giving updates, video updates of exactly what's going on and the decisions that are being made. So that's really important. Drought ends in violent flood, and we have no doubt that those floods are coming, but they're not here yet. And July and August are two of our driest months of the year. So tune in and become more educated about the decisions that are being made to manage through the drought. Our reservoirs have water in them. We're not concerned about running out of water. The reservoirs are doing just what they're supposed to be doing. They store water. When it gets real dry, we release water and we use water. They'll fill back up just like they did after 2011 and 2012. We just got to manage our way through another prolonged drought, and that is Texas. So my last comment of the day is just real briefly, would just like to congratulate one of our board members. Tony Imbro is celebrating his 30th anniversary today. So congratulations. And now that I've embarrassed him, presiding officer, I'll turn it back over to you.
have a concerned citizen. What can you tell me about Fort Hood trying to do groundwater, even though they don't have any money, and Temple Belton County, I guess they're moving, Temple and Bill County moving forward without us on groundwater?
No knowledge of Fort Hood moving forward with a groundwater deal. I would just say this, that the Brazos River Authority, as a non-regulatory agency, has no jurisdiction over groundwater projects. So that would,
It's federal.
it's local property owner or groundwater district issues.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, the board of directors will conduct a closed meeting and executive session on the following matter. To deliberate regarding the following position, General Manager, CEO, pursuant in the authority granted by Section 551.074 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. B, to consult with the attorney regarding Brazos River Authority's protest on Gulf Coast Water Authority's water rights amendment application pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.071 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. If you are not specifically involved in the presentation of the first executive session agenda item, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session item, time will be allowed to clear the boardroom and call the next presenter. We ask that the public please wait in the break room in order to keep the hallways clear until the executive session is finished. We will now enter back into open session at 10:14 a.m. We had 2 agenda items in executive session. Agenda item is a resolution, and I'll ask Director Smith to read the resolution.
Or to turn your mic on.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the sustained exemplary performance by the General Manager, CEO, warrants an annual salary increase of 10% of his existing salary and justifies a one-time merit bonus of 10% of his existing salary.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
So moved by Director Haber.
Second.
Second by who? Director Abraham, please pull forward.
That's fine.
Yes.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Bourne,
Yes.
Director Fernandez,
Yes.
Director Giese. Yes. Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Khan,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry. Director Crone,
I'm sorry, I said the wrong, yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Letton,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
The second agenda item in executive session. Lisa, can you please put the resolution up?
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a contract or contracts with an engineering consultant or consultants in relation to the Brazos River Authority's protest of Gulf Coast Water Right Authority's water right amendment.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to
So
adopt?
moved.
Motion made by Director Wilson, a second made by Director Ruiz. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Warren,
Yes.
Director Fernandez,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Kahn,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Abstain.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith, Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item 3, discussion and possible action, 2024 strategic plan for county, special projects and city initiative manager.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Today's agenda item, well, we'll give it just a minute, for your consideration is the proposed FY 2024 through FY 2029 strategic plan. Our intent in developing this plan was to lay out a framework and provide guidance for our organization over the next 5 years. We wanted to have a plan in place that would help us navigate the significant obstacles, challenges, and opportunities we have as we work towards fulfilling our mission. Caught up there. Good. So before we walk through the components of the plan, I want to take a moment and just step back and talk about some of the revisions that we made. This year's version, as you can tell, we've continued to streamline some of the language, remove some of the operational type tasks that were embedded in there. We also wanted to clarify the language to make sure it supported our goals. In addition to that, as I mentioned too, we're looking at a 5-year approval, and that's to better align the plan itself with the intent of strategic planning, which is long-term in nature. By doing this, we help ensure a couple of things. First is that we have team alignment, making sure that we're all working towards common goals and, moving forward with our mission. We benefit from enhanced efficiency, allowing us the ability to anticipate and adapt to changes as they come. And finally, that clear direction and purpose to make sure we don't get overcome by all the noise and the many other things that can come into our day-to-day work. So what I want to do now is move through the different components of the plan. We'll spend as little or as much time as you want to on it. I'll walk through it fairly quickly, so if you get to a point and want to ask a question, certainly stop. First, we'll start with our mission, vision, and guiding principles. Again, our mission is why we exist, and that's to develop, manage, and protect the water resources. Our vision is to be that trusted leader. And our guiding principles are the things that we value. Those are the things that we must embody in order to be successful as an organization. These are unchanged again from the previous plan, so nothing controversial there. Goal 1 has to do with developing water resources, and these are our strategies that include surface water supplies, groundwater supplies, conveyance projects to move water where we can, and also, as the gentleman spoke of earlier, aquifer storage and recovery, the projects that we're looking at in that vein. Goal number 2 has to do with managing our water resources, and this is making sure we're working our water supply in an efficient manner. Also keeping our capital improvement projects to make sure that our infrastructure is sound. The most important water we have is the water that we already have behind the gates, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of it. And finally, we have on this one the contract water operations, our water and wastewater treatment operations that we provide throughout the basin. Goal number 3, this has to do with protecting our water resources. And this one is really centered on our monitoring programs that support us in our mission, policy engagement to support science-based decision-making when those opportunities arrive, and finally, our strategic partnerships, things like our freshwater mussel agreement that will allow us other flexibility. Goal number 4, this one is one that had a pretty significant overhaul, and this has to do with looking internally at how we operate and making sure that we are being efficient with the resources we do have. That includes our internal and external planning efforts. Looking at our internal processes, the risk-based capital asset management program is one. And then also finally, our systematic management of organizational risk, making sure we tie all that stuff together, our business continuity efforts, as well as emergency management programs. Goal number 5 is another one that we tidied up quite a bit and tried to streamline it back to, again, strategic initiatives. And those have to do with ensuring that we're being transparent in our actions, developing and also maintaining the stakeholder relationships we already have. And then finally, engaging on policy discussions where appropriate to support our mission. And last, but certainly not least, is our culture and making sure that we're developing a culture that embraces and supports our employees, making sure that we're recruiting the best, developing the people that we do have so they can have that long tenure. We're also looking at making sure that our employee package that we offer is, a comprehensive package. And finally, we need to make sure that we capture safety in that as well, making sure that our workplace is as safe as it can be. So these 6 strategic goals, again, we've tried to make them succinct, but it's built into this comprehensive plan. We really feel like this is the roadmap that takes us through the next 5 years. We wanted it to be something that we could communicate clearly to employees and also external sources. So that's how we ended up where we were. If there's any questions on any of that, I'll be happy to back up and talk about it, or if not, we have a resolution. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the strategic plan, including the mission statement, vision statement, guiding principles, goals, objectives, and strategies, be approved and adopted for a 5-year period as presented at the July 31, 2023 meeting.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Director LaChance has made a motion, and the second is made by Director Geesey. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Warren,
Yes.
Director Fernandez,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Kahn,
Yes.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Item number 4, discussion and possible action on this.
Good morning. I'm going to go through the annual operating plan, but before I do it, let me talk a little bit about how the plan was prepared. We started back in December of last year, taking a look at the numbers. We look at the actuals that we had. It's a bottom-up type forecast. We also look at the project worksheets that come in for different operating projects as well as the capital projects. Those have been reviewed also by our PMO department as well. So we did a pretty good job, I think, on the FY24 budget. Rolling forward, May, we brought to you basically the proposed budget. And then in June, we went out on customer meetings, and we went to 3 customer meetings with no questions at all for the presentation itself. And now we're to the July board meeting, to the final review. Now, what I'll do first is kind of walk through the system rate calculation, and then I'll have supporting slides not only for the rate calculation, but other things that are in the annual operating plan. So let's get started here. First of all, you start with the water supply operating expense. We had an increase there of, from last year, mainly due to salaries and benefit increase. Second is debt subject to coverage. And the increase there is the money we're going to borrow from the Texas Water Development Board, and I've talked to you about that in the last couple of board meetings. And I'll have other agenda items that will address that as well. And also I'll talk a little bit more about what does debt subject to coverage is in the calculation. Next is debt not subject to coverage. And these are our loans that we have with the Army Corps of Engineers for the 8 lakes that we have, core lakes that we have out there for the water storage. Next is the operating projects. These are projects that do not build out to the major infrastructure of our basin. They're basically studies, assessments, they can be minor repairs, things like that. And those are included in the numbers as well for the system rate, giving you a total of $66.8 million in expenses. Now, as other incomes and non-system rate contracts, and in that, the non-system contracts are things like Tier 2 contracts for our customers, and that is where the customer pays one rate for the water used and then half for the water not used. Other income, Sugar Land's one of them, the waste treatment facility out there. It is under contract for the revenue. We have East Williamson County, the water treatment facility near Taylor, that revenue that we get there, and then basically interest income on our investments. That is the largest increase between those two periods because of the fact is when we put the budget together for last year, the Fed rate was near 0, and now it's near 5%, giving you a total of 25.2. Now let's talk about debt subject to coverage. A 1.3 ratio is a board requirement. It's also above bond covenant requirement. You simply take the 0.3 and you multiply it times the 4.5, and that gives you 1.3. And that's the surplus we have to have. So you take basically the 66.8 minus the 25.2, add back the 1.3, and you get $43 million we need from our system rate holders. Divide that by the 478,000 acre feet that's under contract, and you get $90 an acre foot. Now then, I've been talking to the customers and I've presented to the board that we need $93 system rate to maintain the level of increase to cover our capital projects that we have coming up in the future. So I'm using another reserve approved by the board called rate stabilization, adding 1.7 million back into what we need from our customers, giving a total of $45 million, divided by the 478, gives you 93.5. Later on, I'll show you in the 5-year plan how that rate is helping to keep steady increase. The 1.7 also is used to pay for capital projects as too. So now let's just talk about some of the numbers. 719, we've already talked about the 478. We talked about the utilities, and in the utilities is mainly NRG. The 2 tiers made up of Dow and Bell County, and then you have some other smaller customers out there. Revenues, we've already talked about the 45 million. We talked about the 7.8 for the non-system. We've also talked about Eastern County. You have your lake operations, your permits for your lakes. We have some, stakeholders. We have grants and stakeholders out there, and some other income. Another big chunk is called cost reimbursable. Now, these are facilities owned by our customers in which we manage waste treatment plants like Temple Belton, Hutto, Williamson County Regional Rural Water Line. Every dollar cost that's incurred by those facilities, we can bill it back to the customers. Later, I'll show you how the expenses offset that as part of the line of business. Just kind of gives you an idea of the rates and the difference in there. Agricultural rate is 70% of the system rate. 2-tier rates are set by CPI index that comes out in November, and I bring that back to the board in January for your approval. The other ones are all set by, sometimes with CPI contracts, but they're basically contract-driven rates. These are average rates, and many of them are calculated on whatever the contract says you have, it's going to be calculated based off of. So these are just estimates. So let's talk a little bit about the expenses. Employees, the ECI, the Employee Cost Index, is we're going to use 4% with a 1.5% merit. We have a net increase of 7 full-time positions with 2 part-time. The Army Corps of Engineers did raise their amount of expenses for the O&M by $664,000 to help maintain the 8 core lakes that we have out there. And now talking about the Army Corps of Engineers, you take in the debt service plus the O&M, it's about $5.6 million. And that's $12 of the 93.5 that's used out there. So now operating expenses. We've already talked about all the different pieces, and the cost reimbursable is 17.1. We had $22 million in revenue and 17.1. Later, I'll show you that we have capital projects of 4.9 that matches to the 22. This is just how we're going to spend the money on the O&M expenses, the categories. These are operating projects that we talked about that do not build out to the major capital structures. So let's talk about capital improvement projects. This just gives you a pie chart of the types of projects we've got in different type of categories. And then this is the budget we have for next year for the capital projects. Big ones are obviously Allen's Creek, Tanner Gates, East Williamson County expansion. The two that I talked about was basically the Williamson County Regional Water Line, ion generator, and phase 3 pumps. That's the 4.9 million that is going to be, it's their projects and they pay for it, though it's in the capital project plan. This is an eye chart, but I kind of wanted to spell out over the life of the projects, we're going to be spending over $1 billion. In the next 5 years, we're talking about $400 million. So this is some of the reasons why I want to keep an even keel on the rates to pay for these and not impact our customers with any kind of spikes in the rates. This just shows the line of business, shows that the 4.9 offsets to the cost reimbursable. This just shows the reserves. We start off about 59, our projected at 59, ending up with 67. The 46 is the money we're going to be borrowing from the Texas Water Development Board. So how does the 67 break out? Into the buckets, put buckets in there. So, it's just colorful. So rate stabilization reserve, we talked about that, and that can be spent on capital projects and O&M. You basically have your contingency fund, which is unanticipated O&M expenses. Working capital is 90 days of the O&M water supply, and then self-insurance for the risk type expenses that you might have. These buckets do play into the calculation of the system rate too. Just want to show you what the impact of borrowing from Texas Water Development Board. It's going to raise our debt structure. Now, the numbers below on the contract revenue debt is debt that we have, but the customers pay for the Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line. They pay the debt service for that. So let's talk about the 5-year plan. The non-system is consistent, rate out there is consistent with their current contracts. We assume that all non-agricultural contracts will renew at the full system rate whenever they come due. We also use in the O&M expenses increased by historical 10-year index rolling average. Debt service, we include all that in what's assumed in the next 5 years. And then I mentioned before, operating projects as well, capital projects are based off the updated project budget worksheets. What do the numbers look like? As you can see, in the bottom part of here, we would have needed to borrow the money from Texas Water Development Board. I'll have more agenda later on. But with that $16 million savings over the term of the debt, we would have gone out in the open market anyway to borrow the money. This is basically down here is your 90-day working capital. So you can see I maintain approximately about a 6-month working capital. This helps us with bond ratings, and they like to see a healthy amount of reserves that we maintain throughout the periods. It's a busy slide, but again, what we're doing here is doing the balancing act with all those buckets that we talked about, the reserves. Another thing we're looking at here too is, here's the projected rate of 1.3. Remember the debt subject to coverage? It's high, it stays high, increase here. And then when you get out here, it balances out to 1.3, which means we've kept a steady increase of rates, but when we get out into 28, it does equal out itself there, which means we're keeping the rates at a good steady level that the customers can project and forecast. This is just basically a little simpler to look at and see. The rates we show probably in the mid 6.5 to a little bit at 7% when we get out in 28. And that'll probably continue to project out at that level there. And we really didn't have any questions from their customers for this. I've been showing them these numbers, so they're used to seeing them, and they're forecasting them. So again, here's just a smooth rate. I did catch this. This should have been 2028. Sorry about that. It's a typo, but the rates I've tried to keep over the last 8 years, very smooth and going up.
So we had 3 customer meetings in 3 different parts of the basin. Some of you attended some of those. We did have one question about debt coverage, but all of the other questions pretty much related to interruptible water and us not having interruptible water this year. And that's something that if in drought conditions, we don't have. So there were no complaints or concerns. We sent a letter to all of our ratepayers talking about their rates, and we got very little, if any, feedback about our rates and our rate structure and where we plan on going over the next 5 to 10 years.
David, thank you very much. And David Collingsworth, I think the questions keep at bay because you present this every year at the customer meetings. And so the entities that are contracting with us see over time, they can see what their rate's going to be proposed for 2028. So thank you for that, communicating that.
You're welcome, and let me embarrass somebody if you don't mind. We have at the Brazos River Authority the best budget manager in all of the world, maybe the universe. And she is, all seriousness, she does an outstanding job in communicating with our customers. A lot of them are coming to her as early as December and January, and they're wanting data so that they can populate their budgets. She is a problem solver and a fireman, if you will, in managing and helping our staff be successful in their day-to-day projects. So Michelle Giroir, where are you?
She can stand.
I know. She didn't want me to do this, but Michelle Giroir is absolutely the best.
One other point too is every year she's been winning awards for GFOA, and that is a very tough award to make. And you should have gotten your books a couple of weeks ago, and it is an outstanding budget. And she did a great job again. So thanks again, Michelle. No, it's consistency. It's just basically showing consistency. I don't want to drop it down to the 90-day working capital. I don't want to cut it that lean. So the ratio is 1.3. All I have to do is maintain 1.3. That's all I have to do, and I'm satisfied. But I don't like to cut down the reserves that low. I kind of like to keep a 6-month reserve in there.
All right, let's go ahead and move forward to reading the resolution.
Oops, sorry, I did that.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority Board that the fiscal year 2024 annual operating plan and multi-year capital improvement plan budget are presented to the board at the July 31, 2023 meeting be approved and adopted, including the following provisions. Be it further resolved that the General Manager, CEO, is hereby authorized to make expenditures and enter into contracts for expenditures as listed in the budget, in accordance with the Brazos River Authority's General Operations Practices, Policy 2.01, Authority and Responsibilities of the Board of Directors and General Manager, Chief Executive Officer. Be it further resolved that the general manager, CEO, is hereby authorized to make adjustments in the individual line item amounts of the budget, provided that the total amount expended shall not exceed the total amount authorized for each operating division as follows. Water supply, $66,797,128. Cost reimbursable, $17,100,662. Total operating budget, $83,897,790. Water supply, $41,016,000. Cost reimbursable, $4,858,000. Total capital budget, $45,874,000. Be it further resolved that the board hereby adopts the multi-year capital improvement plan as presented in the budget. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a rate of $93.50 per acre foot of water annually for fiscal year 2024 for both the system rate and the interruptible water rate. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a rate of $65.45 per acre foot of water annually for the fiscal year 2024 for the agricultural water rate. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a methodology for quarterly payments or monthly payments to include a multiplier to be applied to the annual payment to allow the Brazos River Authority to recover interest lost on any unpaid balance, plus a service charge for administrative costs, including but not limited to costs involving the billing, accounting, and collecting for quarterly or monthly payments. Be it further resolved by the board that the methodology used to determine the multiplier consists of applying the current savings rate the Brazos River Authority would be earning on the funds if paid in full annually to the unpaid balance on a monthly or quarterly schedule to determine lost interest, and that the service charge shall remain at $20 per invoice to cover additional administrative costs for billing, accounting, and collecting the associated payments. And be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts an annual interest rate of 4% and a daily interest rate charge of 0.0109589%, 4% divided by 365, to be applied for quarterly and monthly payments for fiscal year 2024.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion made by you, Director Savage, sorry. A second made by Director. Sorry, John Henry Gluten. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Taylor, Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Warren,
Yes.
Director Fernandez,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Kahn,
Yes.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Hey, yes. Thank you. I'm back again for every 2 years to re-up and get authorization for David to enter into our Clean Rivers Program contract. For those that are new, we participate with the state of Texas in the Texas Clean Rivers Program per the Texas Clean Rivers Act, which was passed in 1991. The goals are overall to generate comprehensive water quality planning and management data, ensure the state has safe, clean water supply, and requires that ongoing assessment of water quality, and that's really the piece where we come in to compliance with this act. Yes, we perform for the Clean Rivers Program, which is run through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. We generate quality assured data. We identify and evaluate water quality issues, conduct cooperative watershed planning opportunities throughout the basin, recommend water quality management strategies back to TCEQ when we do identify problem areas, and perform outreach to the basin stakeholders regarding water quality and how they can have a positive impact on water quality in their daily lives. These contracts are 2-year term contracts. The total amount that BRA will be receiving for the next biennium is $948,176, split evenly across the 2 fiscal years. We are not required to contribute any match. The effective start date of the contract will be September 1, 2023.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to enter into an agreement with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, whereby TCEQ will provide funding in the amount of $948,176 to the Brazos River Authority to perform water quality monitoring services and other activities under the Texas Clean Rivers Program for fiscal years 2024 and 2025.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion made by Director Wilson, a second made by Cat Parks. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Abraham.
Yes.
Director Boring.
Yes.
Director Fernandez.
Yes.
Director Geezy.
Yes.
Director Jimenez.
Yes.
Director Kahn.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director LaChance.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Luton.
Yes.
Director Embro.
Yes.
Director Parks. Director Ruiz. Director Savage.
Yes.
Director Smith. Director Wilson.
Yes. Presiding officer, at this time, I recommend we take a 10-minute break and move to our building ceremony. I have failed you in projecting how long this meeting was going to last. I hope that's not a part of my future performance evaluations. But about 25 minutes, so after we come back from lunch, we'll be quick.
All right, everybody, we'll be right back in here to start promptly at 11 o'clock. Agenda item number 11, report and possible discussion on central office building dedication ceremony by David Collingsworth, General Manager and CEO.
So I've done this a lot, not building dedications, but stand behind this mic for many, many years and give many, many presentations. And Phil always made me really nervous. And here's the way it would go. For those of you that have never been to one of our board meetings, we have an agenda item and we have a lot of data and information that we share with our board, and then we ask for them to consider that agenda item. And then the board adopts, they have a second, would you please poll the board? And they poll the officers, and then they start this process in alphabetical order of a voice approval. Yes, yes. And somewhere between Bell, Director Bell, and Zaccanino, there's a conversation that takes place between whoever's behind this podium and Phil. And it goes like this. Come here. And you lean down and Phil says, you got to be brief. You got to be really brief. We're behind. Yes, sir. And we've already coordinated this, and he's already seen the slides, and he already understands the message that he has portrayed to us that we want to get to the board. And then you come back and you fix the mic, and he looks at you and he goes, come here. So you lean down one more time, and he says, how many slides do you have? Well, Phil, I have 28. And he says, okay, good. So you get back here, and we've got a slide up already, And then as you start to talk, he says, "You got 3 minutes and 3 slides." And I think that's one of the slides he was talking about was the introduction slide. But it gets worse. Because when you start to present, you get the Phil Ford ceremonial motion. And can I get that from the peanut gallery? Yeah. Let's go. With that in mind, we will keep this brief and get to lunch and fellowship. And today's a really special day for us. And on behalf of the Brazos River Authority, our board, and our staff, we're just so honored that the Ford family can be here. We know you're really busy. We have some past directors that are here. We know you guys are really busy. And it's just really an honor to have you here today. I want to start off with a few introductions. And as I say these names, I think at least those of you on staff will go, "Oh, I remember." But I want to introduce to you Lane and Courtney. Can you wave at us, Lane and Courtney? We heard a lot of Lane and Courtney stories, and these are two of Phil and Chris's grandchildren. Phil was a husband. His wife, Chris, is here. Chris, thank you so much for being here. Phil was a father. Sorry. Phil was a father. Jeff and Amy are here. Jeff is Phil's son. Amy here, thank you all for being here. His daughter Meredith and her husband Eric are here. Thank you all for being here. We just heard so many stories about you and your grandkids. I told you months ago, or a year or so ago, that we knew you, but we really hadn't even met you that much. But we were so glad that you were here. In his professional life, Phil was a lieutenant general of the United States Air Force. That's big kid stuff. That's a 3-star general. Today in the United States Air Force, there are 325,000 enlisted in the Air Force. I was about to call them soldiers, but I don't know that would go over well, would it, Jeff? Sorry. 325,000, but only 47 of those have achieved a 3-star rating in the United States Air Force. Phil was a general manager. He was a CEO. Phil was a football coach. Phil was a football player. We got to see pictures of Phil at his retirement party wearing the football uniform, and he was a pretty big strapping buck, pretty big guy. But he was a football coach and an educator before he decided to join the Air Force. I told in an interview after he passed, I told the Waco Tribune-Herald that Phil was a leader of leaders. I also told him that he was the decision maker. And we spent a lot of Friday afternoons because Phil hated to leave the office on a Friday with something that was hanging out there that didn't have direction. So myself and Laura Lee and Matt and so many others would end up in Phil's office debating, discussing where something was going to go. And as we would talk about that, Phil, I haven't run this by the family, but I thought Phil was a really good listener. Attention to the family at this time, ladies and gentlemen. Phil was a really good listener, and Phil would listen, and he would ask questions. And then at some point in that conversation, Phil would say 2 words: break, break. Right? Now, that could have meant any one of 2 or 3 things. It usually meant I've made up my mind. It could have meant I'm done with this, we're moving on to another subject. But it was very clear to us what it meant. It's my turn to talk. I've made a decision. And at so many times in this organization's history while Phil was here, that was the direction that we needed as a management team: someone listening, educating themselves, and putting the plan out. And when you left his office, when you got to that door, you had no doubt what your role and responsibility were. He was an outstanding leader. If you think your resume is impressive, you probably shouldn't compare it to Mr. Phil Ford's. And let me be real clear with you. Phil was a retired 3-star general, and he refused for us in the water business to refer to him as general. So I mean no disrespect to him by calling him Phil. he achieved something of greatness in the United States Air Force, but here in this office, he wanted to be Phil Ford. As a three-star general, and if you looked at his resume in the War College and all the accomplishments and all the awards, there were a few things that really stood out to me. Of his last few responsibilities, Phil was the Director of Operations and Logistics for the United States Strategic Command. He was the commander of the 8th Air Force. Phil flew a whole list of airplanes. But when I got some street time with him, going to meetings, and I questioned him about flying because I love to fly, we would always end up talking about B-52s. Phil flew the B-1, Phil flew the B-2, but I think he was most proud of flying the B-52, and if you'll do research, the B-52 in United States Air Force history is the mega plane of all planes. And we were driving down the road one day, and my daughter was fixing to fly off to Hawaii, and I was really nervous about that for a whole lot of reasons. And one, about the plane flying out of gas. Two is what happens if the GPS breaks and they can't find the island, where the heck they're going to go. I said, Phil, no, really, what's the longest you've ever been in an airplane? And I wasn't ready for his answer. His answer was 6 days. And I went, no, I didn't mean how long did it take you to get, from here to London, from London to wherever you were going to see Jeff or to Australia or wherever. He said, no, we flew a sortie for 6.5 days. We flew up in a B-52 and we just circled around the North Pole listening to Russia refueling for 6.5 days. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe she is going to get to Hawaii. And the stories were just unbelievable. Phil, as a general manager and CEO, came at a time when this organization was doing good things, but really needed leadership and really needed change. There was a lot of competition about where the organization was going. And when he retired, his fingerprints were on a lot of really significant things, developments, progress in the history of the BRA. Phil was the general manager and oversaw a pipeline that was built that connects two counties and is the lifeline of water into an area along I-35 that had tremendous growth. And you think, oh, well, he just built a pipeline. Well, it was one heck of a pipeline project. And at the end of the day, the customers received this pipeline in a better position than it would have ever been. And there were a lot of challenges, and Phil's leadership was just unbelievable. Phil was the commander-in-chief when we decommissioned our hydropower at Possum Kingdom. And instead of going into details about what that means, I shudder to think what the BRA, how successful or lack thereof we would have been trying to understand a deregulated electric market on top of having to spend almost $50 million to improve the facilities. So that in alone, I think, saved our customers somewhere north of $50 million because of the decisions that he made. Phil was very instrumental in the divestiture of properties, the leasing properties, both commercial and residential, around Possum Kingdom Reservoir, which began to allow us to look more like a river authority that needed to address water issues versus a municipality that was dealing with all of the issues that go along with property management, and that they're very significant. And then last but certainly not least, Phil's fingerprints are all over something called a system operations permit. And in layman's terms, the BRA, with Phil's guidance, was able to go to TCEQ and find a way to remodel the water in the Brazos and prove that there was a lot of water available. So we made over 100,000 acre-feet of water available to our customers at a very, very low cost. The significance there is other agencies like us in the state of Texas are catching on, and they're starting to talk to us about the significance of that. So just really, really amazing accomplishments as far as the general manager goes. But that's not his legacy here. Phil's legacy is our culture. Work ethic is you. You go to work every day, and your work ethic dictates how you get your job done. Our culture is how we see our role and we play as a team. And the football coach in him and the general in him molded this organization and changed our culture. And when he walked out that door, I remember his last words that he said to us. He got on the microphone and he said, Elvis has left the building. True? True. But he did. It was Phil's culture, the change of our culture that created a recipe for success and positioned the BRA to be successful well before we understood all of this growth was coming and all of the challenges that we were going to have. Today's a really special day. I don't think we're honoring Phil Ford because of the bullets that I read in the water projects. We're wanting to honor Phil Ford because he spent over 35 years in the United States Air Force, then he spent over 17 years here serving. And he was a great American and he served us, and that was his passion, and he was very successful and an outstanding leader and an outstanding man. We've got a really short video that we're going to show. It's just photos of Phil. Some of it may mean more to the staff because at times it was just milestones. And then our presiding officer is going to read the resolution that our board approved.
Ford served the Brazos River Authority and the state of Texas for 17 years as general manager and chief executive officer from March 2001 until April 2018. Whereas Mr. Ford oversaw the construction of the central office building, its dedication, and its many renovations. Whereas during the tenure at BRA, Mr. Ford also oversaw construction of Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line, the decommissioning of the Possum Kingdom Lake hydroelectric facilities, the divestiture of residential and commercial lease properties at Possum Kingdom Lake, and whereas during his tenure, Mr. Ford also oversaw the approval of the Systems Operations Permit and Water Management Plan, the first permit of its kind in the state of Texas. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority, to honor the service and memory of Mr. Ford, hereby resolves to formally rename the Waco Central Office the Philip J. Ford Central Office Facilities.
It's time for lunch. We chose to not do an unveiling of the signs because we figured it was going to be somewhere close to 107, and that would ruin your appetite. You're welcome. So lunch is in the room next to us. We do have photographers here. If you want family photos or you want to take photos out front or outside, we'll take as many photos as we can and memorialize the day. So again, thank you all for being here. We will break for lunch. And then after lunch, we'll return to our board meeting. We have a few agenda items, and I refuse to tell you how long they're going to last.
Thank you. So it is 12:12 p.m. The Board of Directors is reconvening into session. We're going to start with agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on Allen's Creek short-term financing by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer. David.
You're not going to do this to me, are you? Okay. All righty, let's, I think back when we talked back in January, I mentioned to the board that we will be needing to borrow some short-term financing to secure the tax-free status from Texas Water Development Board. So why would we do this? Well, basically, the federal tax laws, or the IRS, says that an entity has only 18 months that from the expenditure date to reimburse itself with tax-free or tax-exempt bonds. So you go back May 2nd of 22, when we paid Houston $46 million for their 70% ownership of land as well as permits. And to get the 100% of Allen's Creek, you roll that forward, and that's November 2nd is the date. Texas Water Development gives no guarantees that they can close on the November 2nd date. If we don't close one day, we miss it by one day, it's major consequences as far as the fact is they can't issue a tax-free bonds and other things unraveling, plus the embarrassment with Texas Water Development Board that we didn't close the deal. So to preserve it, we're taking insurance out by doing a short-term borrowing for 3 months. If you look at the bond covenant documents, it shows a maturity date of February 15th, 24. The reason it's out there is the parity that we have with the existing date that we have. So, but at the same time, If we close on November 2nd, the bonds are callable, and the Texas Water Development Board will pay it off on that date. If it's the 3rd, the same with that. It's not tied to the February 24th date. So we have our financial advisors, which is Specialized Public Finance, Stephen Adams, and we have his team here and his bond counsel here today. They looked at other various banks. PNC came back. They gave us the best rates. PNC is in the top 10 banks of the nation. The estimated interest expense that we have for this short-term debt, it says August 22nd. Late on Friday, PNC came back to me and said, can we move that date back to the 15th of August rather than 22nd? And I'll show you the numbers here in a second, but it didn't really change the numbers because the Fed raised the rates last week too. So let's look at the cost. This slide shows 530. Now then, the interest rate that we get from PNC is fixed at 5.92 between August 15th and basically October 16th. Then October 16th through November 2nd, it is variable. Now we used, and I'm going to have to say BYSB rates, short-term rates. We put some pad into that for about 30 to 40 basis points. So we used 5.92 as well for the remaining part of it. That number, 530, is now 582. Now, at the same time, Texas Pool went up to like 5.25 with the interest rates increases from last week. That number now went to 513. So the differential between the two is still about $70,000 difference. Not very cheap money to borrow. The cost of the debt is $280, so we're still at $355,000 or $350,000 cost. I told the board back in January I thought it'd be about $850. It's about $350 now. So with that, I'll ask, are there any questions?
Resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of Brazos River Authority Water Supply System Revenue Bond, taxable new series 2023A, and resolving other matters related thereto. Whereas Brazos River Authority, the authority, was duly created and is lawfully operating under Chapter 8502 Texas Special District Law, Local Laws Code, as amended, the Act, pursuant to and in furtherance of the purposes of Article 16, Section 59 of the Constitution of Texas, and whereas the Act authorizes the authority to issue bonds with respect to the acquisition, purchase, construction, maintenance, repair, improvement, and extension of works, improvements, facilities, plants, buildings, structures, appliances, and property for the purpose of exercising any of its powers and functions under the Act in the manner provided by the Act or any other applicable law. And whereas, in order to facilitate the conservation and development of the surface waters of the Brazos River, the authority has heretofore established the Brazos River Water Supply System comprised of various facilities of the authority, and whereas the authority heretofore pledged revenues derived from said system to the security and payment of its water supply system revenue bonds, Series 1991, the Series 1991 bonds, and obligations on a parity therewith, and whereas the Board of the Authority has determined to issue the hereinafter authorized bond for the purpose of acquiring and permitting a reservoir to be known as Allens Creek Reservoir, the project, to be secured by and made payable from a subordinate lien on the net revenues of said system, and whereas the authority will no longer issue bonds payable from a lien on the net revenues of the authority's water supply system on a parity with the Series 1991 bonds or bonds heretofore issued on a parity therewith, and whereas the bond hereinafter authorized is to be issued and delivered pursuant to the Act and other applicable laws for the purposes herein provided. Therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority, Section 1, Recitals, Covenants, Agreement, and Amount and Purpose of the Bond, the Board of the Authority hereby incorporates the recitals set forth in the preamble hereto as if set forth in full at this place, and further finds and determines that said recitals are true and correct. Additional terms used in this resolution are defined as set forth in the new Series 2023A Bond Covenants Agreement, the agreement, substantially in the form presented at this meeting, the terms of which are hereby incorporated herein as if set forth in full at this place. The bond of the authority is hereby authorized to be issued and delivered in the principal amount of $46 million for purposes of paying the costs of the project and paying the cost of issuing the bond. Section 2, Designation and Terms of Sale. A, Designation. Each bond issued pursuant to this resolution shall be designated Brazos River Authority Water Supply System Revenue Bond, Taxable New Series 2023A. B, Sale of Bond. The bond is hereby sold and shall be delivered to PNC Bank, National Association, the lender, at a purchase price equal to 100% of the principal amount thereof. The bond has been purchased by the lender pursuant to a purchase agreement, the provisions of which are incorporated herein, in which purchase agreement the General Manager, CEO of the authority is hereby authorized and directed to execute and deliver in the name of the authority. C, Terms of Sale. The bond shall be dated as of August 15th, 2023, shall be in the denomination of the total outstanding principal amount of the bond, shall be numbered R-1, shall be payable to the lender, and shall mature on February 15th, 2024. The bond shall bear interest from the delivery date set forth in the form of bond set forth in Section 2 of the agreement to the date of maturity or redemption prior to maturity at the rate per annum equal to 5.92% through October 15, 2023, and thereafter at the daily BS/BY rate plus 0.45%, but never more than the maximum rate payable on February 15, 2024. The bond shall be subject to redemption pursuant to the provisions of the agreement. Section 3, Addition to System. The board hereby specifically adds the Allens Creek Reservoir to the system for all purposes. Section 4, Amendment. The Series 2015 agreement is hereby amended by deleting subsection 20B in its entirety. Section 5, Immediate Effect. This resolution shall be effective immediately from and after its adoption.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Chance, a second by Director Wilson. Please poll the board.
Sir Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Bourne, Director Fernandez,
Yes.
Director Giese,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Kahn,
Yes.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Litton,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith, Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action on Allens Creek, Texas Water Development Board financing agreement by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
The slides, not the covenant. Oh, that'd be a killer. Perfect. Yeah. Back in January, you gave me an approval to file an application with the Texas Water Development Board for $50 million. In April 6th, we received the invitation to file the application. May 4th, we did file the application itself. July 25th, the board met on SWIFT funding, which is what this is. I did go down and attend it in Austin, and the board unanimously approved the $50 million, the funding for the application. In this board meeting, we will have a resolution adopting the financing agreement that basically commits BRA to borrow the money from Texas Water Development Board. August, September timeframe is when the financing agreement gets signed and executed. We do have a date now, it's September 7th. Then in September 25th, we come back to the board, and that's where we get authorization to actually issue the bonds to Texas Water Development Board. October timeframe is when the Texas Water Development Board goes out and sells their bonds for the money that we need back. And then November 2nd timeframe is when we actually get the money comes back from Texas Water Development and pays off the PNC short-term loan. Again, just a reminder, the 46 million is what we're technically going to get out of this, the deal here. The cost of issuance is $385,000. We do have to maintain a $3 million debt reserve. That is a bond covenant. And then we have a contingency in there of $578 for the rates. Just again, a reminder, it's $16 million savings over the life of the bond. Great deal. We were going to have to borrow the money anyway in the open market. As you saw in my 5-year forecast, this money will take us through 2025 and has no impact to the system rate holders throughout the term of the debt. And again, the $578,000 contingency is in there for the rate variations. So are there any questions?
Seeing no questions, there's a resolution. Please read the resolution.
Resolution approving the execution and delivery of a financing agreement with the Texas Water Development Board for Water Supply System Revenue Bonds, New Series 2023B and New Series 2023C. Whereas the Brazos River Authority anticipates receiving a commitment from the Texas Water Development Board, pursuant to which the Texas Water Development Board agrees to loan approximately $50 million to the authority as evidenced by the issuance of Brazos River Authority Water Supply System Revenue Bonds, New Series 2023B and New Series 2023C, to fund costs related to the acquisition of land and water rights permits. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that 1, the financing agreement committing the authority to borrow from the Texas Water Development Board with terms and conditions in the best interest of the authority is hereby approved, and the General Manager, CEO, is hereby authorized and directed to execute and deliver the financing agreement. And 2, this authorization shall become effective immediately upon adoption.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Director Crone has made a motion, second by Director Ruiz. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Taylor? Yes. Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Fernandez?
Yes.
Director Geezy?
Yes.
Director Jimenez?
Yes.
Director Kahn?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Luton?
Yes.
Director Embrook?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Agenda item number 8, report and possible discussion on legislative update by Matt Phillips, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Manager. Matt.
Good afternoon. You should see the resolution I'm going to have for y'all. Luckily, I don't have one. You might want to make a motion to adjourn. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened during this session and obviously the subsequent special sessions. Talk a little bit about the things that passed. Obviously, we track and engage on hundreds, if not thousands of bills. Most of those don't pass, but I'll talk about some of the stuff that did. Broad overview. So Probably the one word I'd use to describe the regular session is unprecedented. I think that word was thrown around a lot before session, mainly referring to how much money they had in surplus. But there were some other unprecedented things that happened during the session. I'll point out a couple of them. The House expelled a member. I've been doing this 20 years, never seen that before. And obviously, the House also voted to impeach the Attorney General. Two things that many of us that have worked in this process a long time have never seen. So unprecedented is probably a good word to use to describe this session. The other unprecedented thing that happened, and I promise that's the last time I'll use that word, is that despite it being the major priority for leadership, the House and Senate failed to reach a deal on property tax relief at the end of the regular session. I think it was expected that they would, particularly given the surplus money they had to work with. Got to the end of session and did not get it done. That forced the need for an immediate special session, which began on May 29th. And to say that session was unproductive would be an understatement. They were unable to reach a deal again on property tax relief. The House and the governor had their version of what they wanted. The Senate had its version of what they wanted, and they could not come to agreement. The other thing that happened, and so that session basically ran its 30-day course, that special did. And so nothing ever came out of that one. The other thing that happened during that first special session is because it overlapped the time frame during which the governor could still sign or veto legislation from the regular session, as a way of potentially coaxing a deal on property tax, the governor began vetoing bills from the regular session. And he ended up vetoing about 86 bills total, which is not necessarily an unprecedented number. Promised I wasn't going to use that again, but I'll say it again. But it is still a pretty high number in terms of vetoes that happened during a session. I only mention that because one of our bills got caught in the shrapnel, and it was our ASR bill for Eastern Williamson County. If you remember, we had a bill that we proposed that Senator Schwartner and Representative Harris carried that would have allowed us to do ASR as part of our East Williamson County expansion. It was an innocent bystander in the process. In fact, the veto proclamation was very clear that this is a very important bill, but it's not as important as passing property tax relief. So the hope of us and many others that had their bills get caught up in this deal were that during a subsequent special session, we would be able to bring that bill back. That didn't happen. So the legislature went into a second special session immediately after the expiration of the first on June 27th. That lasted till July 13th. As most of you know, they did reach a deal on property taxes. They ended up passing somewhat of a hybrid between the House and the Senate. Now, the hope that several of us had that our bills would come back did not happen. The legislature adjourned sine die and went home. I think many of them had been there too long. There were a lot of hurt feelings. Nobody wanted to be there anymore. And so we understand that they weren't able to get to our bills. So for all intent and purposes, it seems as if we will have to wait till the next regular session in 2025 to revive our ASR bill. But there is a little bit of hope this fall, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Going forward, the next time you'll see the legislature, or at least the Senate, back in session will be the Attorney General impeachment trial, which will take place on September 5th. Can't tell you how long that's going to last. Obviously, a lot of folks will tune into that because it's a process that they haven't gone through since the late 70s, so none of us have ever actually seen one, or at least I know I haven't. And the legislature is expected to come back in a third special session to deal with the subject of school choice. And that is expected to be in October. At least that's the month that's been thrown out so far. We are hopeful that if a deal can be reached on school choice, which could be a big if, that many of the vetoed bills, including our ASR bill, could come back and be able to be passed during that third special session. So we won't have to wait until the next regular session. But reaching a deal on school choice is a big if. It doesn't slow us down. I will say that. David brings up an important point. We could have maybe started the permitting on ASR sooner had that bill passed, but it doesn't really slow down our timeline in terms of when we were going to implement it. It would have been nice to go ahead and have it done. 2025 doesn't delay us that much, but if we can get it done during this third special session, we've already got the bill drafted, our author's ready to file it. It just has to be added to the call. Any questions on that broad overview stuff before I move to stuff closer to us? All right. Okay, we talked about this during my last legislative update. Probably the biggest thing that happened on water was funding. It was anticipated the legislature would dedicate some amount of revenue or some amount of funding to water infrastructure, and they did. They passed Senate Bill 28, SJR 75, which will go to the voters in November, creates two new water funds, the Texas Water Fund, which is your more traditional Water Development Board programs like SWIFT and state participation, the things that we use pretty often. It also created the new Water Supply for Texas Fund, which is more innovative water like desal. ASR is included in that, produced water, potentially water from other states, which we've talked about before. They ended up setting aside $1 billion and 3/4 of that 1 billion will go to the Texas Water Fund. The other quarter will go to the new water supply fund. So there's a split. When we talked about it last, numbers as high as 3 to 5 billion were being kicked around. I think that's what folks would have preferred. But, 1 billion is a lot of money for water infrastructure, and you can't sneeze at it. So we're happy to get whatever we can. The other thing the legislature did was set aside some funding for flood infrastructure. The Flood Infrastructure Fund, which is at the Water Development Board, was oversubscribed. There were more applicants for projects than they had money to fund. And so through the appropriations process, they dedicated an additional $625 million to the fifth. Sunset bills, a lot of natural resource sunset bills this session. You had TCEQ, Water Development Board, PUC, and then you had multiple river authorities. All of those passed. All of them are relatively clean. No bad issues included in them. They all, the pledge was to keep those bills clean, not allow a lot of local or pet things to be inserted in them, which is often hard with sunset bills. And that pledge stayed true through the end of session. So those bills passed and everything was okay with them. Surface water. House Bill 2460 directs TCEQ to update some of the water availability models for some of the remaining basins that they haven't updated. Ours has already been updated. It was updated a couple of years ago. The only problem with House Bill 2460 is they directed TCEQ to do it, but then they didn't fund it. So TCEQ has been directed to go update the WAMs for the Trinity and San Jacinto, but they don't have any money to do it. So it's unlikely that they'll be able to. Probably have to wait till the next appropriations process and actually get money to do that. House Bill 2815 makes a ton of changes to Chapter 49, which is the section of the water code that's essentially provisions applicable to all districts, which includes us. Not much of it affects us. Most of it is directed more at MUDs. The one thing that does affect us or affect you all is it makes changes to per diems, and it links board member per diems to the legislative per diem. So we'll be looking at that and seeing how that affects y'all. House Bill 3232 just allows smaller systems that are undergoing enforcement action, smaller wastewater systems. If they're in the process of integrating into a larger system, their enforcement actions against them can be suspended while they work to integrate into a larger system. It promotes regionalization. It's a good thing. Some of those systems take time to integrate into bigger systems, so that's not a bad thing. Public water system notices just requires some more notice to TCEQ if you're going to have an outage in producing water. We deal with that at East Williamson County. We already provide a lot of notice, so this is not going to be something that's going to be hard for us to comply with. And then wastewater reuse permitting makes permitting direct reuse easier. So right now you have to get 2 levels of permitting in order to do water reuse, and this eliminates one of those. So it was just something to promote water reuse because we're short on water and we need to find ways to use water as much as we can. Groundwater, House Bill 1971 is one we supported. That's the one that puts a shot clock on how long groundwater districts can take to act on proposals for decisions when they come from an administrative law judge during a permitting process. So then they now have a 180-day time frame. They can't sit on those permits forever. So again, that's something we supported because of the regulatory certainty. House Bill 2443 just increases the amount of people that can seek a rule change petition from a groundwater district. So you don't have to have a well, you don't have to have a producing well, you just have to have an interest in groundwater within the district. So essentially you just have to be a landowner within the district to ask for rule changes. House Bill 3059 allows districts to increase export fees for water exporters. Obviously, as somebody that could at some point be a water exporter, that will affect us. It will affect any water exporter. I think this is something we saw coming during the discussions in the interim. How do you mitigate the impacts on a local area that's having groundwater, moved from it to another area? So it allows districts to charge higher fees. And so, for somebody like us, that'll increase project costs, but it's something that we saw coming. House Bill 3278, joint planning for DFCs. All that does is increase transparency when groundwater districts are creating their desired future conditions, which are essentially the parameters under which they permit. They have to have more public meetings, more public comment, more public process, and that's something I think all of us wanted to see. And then Senate Bill 2440, I only mention it because it's something we see throughout our basin, particularly in the more rural, drier areas. It requires for a subdivision plat to be approved for there to be proof of groundwater supply. We're seeing a lot of developments that think about whether or not they have water last, and they don't ever have to prove up that they have water. And you have developments that are built out, and suddenly they realize there's not enough groundwater supply, or in some cases, no groundwater supply. So this requires them to prove up that they're going to have a groundwater supply for that development before their plat can be approved. Transparency. House Bill 3033 makes a bunch of changes to public information law. None of them are bad, none of them are negative. It sets how you define a business day from the standpoint of counting the 10 business day response. It does make some good changes with regard to dealing with vexatious requesters, those who are just requesting so that you have to keep producing information, so how you deal with those. We'll look at those and see if they make any major changes to how we operate. I don't anticipate a ton. House Bill 3440 requires entities that post for open meetings to post the agenda, which we already do. But there were entities that did not do that. They would just post that they were having a meeting. Nobody would have an idea what they were meeting about. So it puts into law a requirement that they have to post the agenda on their website if they're posting that they're having a meeting. And then government entity public notice posting, we have to publish a lot of public notices when we do things, so do a lot of other governmental entities. You have to post them in newspapers, that's expensive. This bill requires newspapers to also post that notice online at no additional cost, so they can't charge an additional fee for that. So that's a good thing. It allows your notices to get out there, particularly for folks that don't access a hard copy paper, which a lot of people don't anymore. Contracting. House Bill 2965 was one that we spent quite a bit of time working on. In statute right now, there's what's called the right to cure statute. It allows a contractor to cure a defect. You have to give them the opportunity to cure a defect if a defect is found on a construction project. Apparently, there were some public entities that were requiring contractors to waive that provision as part of the contract. And so how this bill ended up is that you cannot contractually waive the right to cure statute. Now, part of the discussion of this bill as it moved through the session is in its initial form, it not only made it to where you couldn't waive it, it also removed an exemption from that statute, which we had put in several sessions ago for civil works projects. So for large projects like our dams and major infrastructure, they're exempt from the right to cure statute and have been since the right to cure statute was put in place. The initial bill would have removed that. We were able to negotiate that down to where it only had the non-waiver language in there. But I would anticipate that during the interim, and as we get into next session, there will continue to be an effort to remove that civil works exemption. So that's something that we will obviously, in other water districts and people that do major projects, will be very involved in the next 2 years. House Bill 3437 and 3507 are two really good ones that were very needed. So the limits by which you have to do sealed bids or competitive bids and the limits on change orders for certain construction projects for water districts were set 15 years ago. They're extremely low, 25 to 75,000. Inflation, cost of products, cost of doing projects has gone up. And so the legislature did a very good thing in choosing to increase those. So it's likely that as we go through our process, we may be coming and looking at our numbers and seeing if we need to increase those to increase our efficiency from the standpoint of procurement. That was much needed. And then other, obviously what you spend most of your time on. House Bill 1845 was a good one. It allows folks to start getting their wastewater license earlier, so you don't have to have a GED, so you can start doing it in high school. With workforce shortages, we need folks to get those licenses. We need operators. We're not the only ones, so that'll help us out. It'll help the entire water community out. Senate Bill 29 is not something we would ever do, but it basically prohibits local governments from having mask or vaccine mandates. We are a local government, so it applies to us. We never did that, never will do it, but obviously we certainly won't now because it'll be against the law. Senate Bill 1290, I mentioned that one because you guys have heard about it from the public, and that's has to do with solar facilities, wind facilities, battery facilities. We've had some folks come and talk to us about that, about where they're located and how they're permitted. And really the answer is they're not permitted right now. There's not really a permitting process. The legislature did look at creating one. That didn't pass, but what did pass is a study by TCEQ on the effects of these type of facilities and where they're located. So TCEQ will be doing that in coordination with a number of different agencies. But one of the entities that they're directed to include in that study is river authorities. I can't say it will be us because there's 16 different river authorities and they could pick any other one, but it'll be something that is at least looked at for the folks in our basin that are concerned about that issue. And then Senate Bill 1893, that's the last one I have. That's the TikTok ban. It just bans TikTok on government-issued devices, and there's another couple of apps that it applies to. We've already implemented that. We did it when the governor issued his executive order banning TikTok on government-issued devices, but we will likely be in the process of developing something organization-wide, and waiting for this bill to pass helped us because it gives us a model to look at and go by, and we can just mirror the statute in terms of what we put in place. So what comes next? My folks will be getting with the legal department. They're already reviewing all the different bills that passed to see if we need to make any policy changes. And if we do, you will likely see those in September. I don't anticipate a ton, but there may be a few, and we'll be bringing those to y'all then. So with that, I'm done. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
One question, we had those folks who came in That 1290, is that changing anything about how we would respond or?
I mean, David, you can jump in here too. It won't affect what's going on with them right now because they've got facilities that are already in the ground. It could affect future facilities. So it likely, will I sit here and tell you that it's going to help them specifically? I doubt it because they already have facilities that are right next door to them. But I think the purpose of it is to look at whether or not there should be a more robust regulatory and permitting process around where these facilities go. So it could help folks in the future.
Yeah, I didn't know if it would give them, they came to us because they had no other recourse.
Right.
I don't know if that gave them.
We've told them about the study. David has reached out to them and said, hey, this passed, pay attention to this, get involved, Yeah.
All right, seeing no other comments for discussion, we'll move to agenda item number 9, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2023 third quarter budget report by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
Presiding officer, this is simply a report that's in your book. If there are any questions, we will take questions. If not, we can move to the next agenda item.
Any questions? Seeing none, agenda item 10, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2023 third quarter investment report by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
Presiding officer, this also is a report in your book. And if there are any questions, we will address and answer those. If not, then we have nothing
Any
else.
questions? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Nobody wants to go home?
So moved.
Director Taylor, second by Director Geesey. All in favor? With no further business, the board adjourns at 12:46.